Okay. Well, we've got a presentation that's geared a bit to both Chapter 1 and Chapter 10, and then also to just a recap of things, and leave this for a discussion, Pat and Melissa, for the committee. So the first slide coming up is just to what you've seen a little bit before, but just an agenda to do the project schedule, the new chapter overview, the action agenda, and then sort of next steps, which Simon's going to do and talk about. So just I don't think we have to go through the steering committee now. We have each other and the village staff and consultants, but we might go to the next slide, Simon, on this. Just, I know you've all seen the project schedule, but I think we did want to say tonight, and Simon will cover a little later on, we have now completed, as I think many of you know, all of the additional subcommittee meetings. We wanted to have a second round of meetings with all the subcommittees. We finished those last week. Sylvia has done sort of transcripts or records, really, just a summary, meeting summaries of all of those, so you would all have them. So we'd send them to you and also the trustees. So that was very helpful to us. There were some very good comments made, and we can go over those a little bit later on. So that has been accomplished, and then we wanted to have, and the committee, I believe, wanted to have this additional meeting in December to sort of, and I think it was a good idea, recap where we are on the draft, and where we are too on the draft generic environmental impact statement. We shared with you the build out analysis already, and we are, I would say, about 2/3 of the way through now the DEIS, aiming to get a draft done by December 15th. So I think we'll have quite a few products in place this year, by the end of the year. And then it leaves us another 5-6 month stretch in 2021. So with that, Simon, we might go to the next slide. All of the chapters in blue, as you know, are already online. And what we sent you Friday was the introduction, public outreach process, planning goals. So the introduction, and then we also sent you the action agenda and implementation. And we thought we'd just highlight those two a little bit right now. And the next slide kind of does that. The introduction is, you can use this in a way, particularly with Chapter 10, the action agenda, as an executive summary, if you will. But the chapter goes through, what is a plan, the organization of this plan, and the process, what got us here, the sort of origins of the plan, the RFP process, what were the studies that predated the plan and helped shape it a little bit, and of course, particularly the public engagement process. And then the chapter ends with a summary of those goals, chapter by chapter. So you can see the organization of each chapter in general there in the little graphic, with the chapters starting with planning goals, going through the existing conditions, and then going through the strategies for each chapter where those were relevant. So, and then of course, ending up with recommendations in the chapters. So that's the outline of Chapter 1. And then we also sent to you Chapter 10, which is the next slide. You've seen parts of this already. We went through the future land use map, and we went through a lot of the implementation tools, for instance, legislation, namely zoning, and future planning studies, ongoing planning, and partnerships, but particularly this future land use plan. I think a thing about the future land use plan, as you know, as Jaime summarized pretty well, I think, in one of our subcommittee meetings, that there's no significant change here from the combination of existing land uses and existing zoning. A real change is on the waterfront, as we discussed previously. We have established here west of the train railroad tracks a sort of waterfront resilience area. So indicating that that's, we'd like to try to avoid new development, particularly residential development on that side of the track. So you've got a future land use plan that provides expected future pattern for the village. It's one of a balance, we hope, between really preservation of existing development and zoning patterns and resilience on the waterfront, but in the downtown area, the Croton area where the overlay zones are, and in the T-zone, some changes that were covered in the are covered in this chapter and also in the land use and zoning chapter. And then most importantly, then this chapter ends, as you know, from page 9 on pretty much with an action agenda. And this next slide you've seen, because we've shown this to everybody as to how this action agenda was sort of outlined, and then sort of the type of strategy, the responsible party for doing it, and the time frame. And what we're trying to do here is give the trustees and also perhaps the committee an agenda that could be looked at every year. I mean, we'll call for the plan not to be done for, you know, another 10 years, but you could look at this every year and use this action agenda as a, I think like a crib sheet or a, you know, an update just to see where you are and where the trustees are in this. And then the next slide just gives you an example of what's in the chapter. Every chapter has different strategies, and we've tried to cull them out. We're just using here as an example, economic development. What's the strategy? How does it get specified? Who's a responsible party maybe for doing each strategy? And then what's the time frame? Is it short term? Is it like the first one here, ongoing? Is it a strategy that might be long term also? So that's the organization of chapter 10. And I think that those are critical charts at the end, which really do, I think, merit your review, because it tries to bring the whole plan together here. And I think this next slide just tries to just mention here, Manny, this is something that you had asked us about, and we did really want to get to this point where we think that chapter 1 and 10 combined provide that executive summary to the plan. In other words, chapter 1 summarizes the whole process, how we got there, public outreach, the goals. And then chapter 10 gives you the details of the action plan. And so these two combined would be that executive summary, and could be, it could also be done as a separate handout for use in the future. So that's where we think we are with all of the drafts now completed, all of the chapters, and then by putting 1 and 10 together, being able to give you an executive summary. And with that, Simon, let's go to the public outreach, and I'm going to turn this to Simon.
Thanks, Frank. Yeah, we just wanted to go through these last couple of public outreach slides. We know you've all seen this, but we thought this would be a nice opportunity, because this is now our 9th meeting with all of you to look back on what we've done so far and what we've been able to get done with the public. We've updated. The only new number here really is the project website. We try to keep updating how many unique visitors we've gotten each time we meet with you. So we're up to just shy of 1,800 there. The rest of the numbers here are the same. And one thing that we've circled back to and started showing is how many subcommittee members we've actually met with. On the 6 committees, there's some overlap. There's a couple of folks who participated in more than one committee, but it's a total of 63 unique members that we've met with 2 times over the course of those 12 meetings with the 6 subcommittees. And then again, just by way of reminder, all of the other different types of outreach that we've done along the way, of course, meeting with all of you. We know that you all have been meeting in study halls, and we understand those are ongoing. The 6 subcommittees I just talked about. We had the virtual village hall back in April. We've briefed the Board of Trustees 8 times so far. We're expecting another 4 between now and in April or May. The 2 walking tours, which I think were very helpful for all of us, the downtown and the waterfront walking tours to get to see everything on the ground. The steering committee public hearing back in October, and the Board of Trustees public hearing, which we've got penciled in February or March of 2021. And of course, Sylvia has been coordinating throughout the process with Jaime and Jamie Hoffman on social media posts, mostly through Facebook. Again, just by way of reminder here, these were the subcommittees and when we met with everyone. We wrapped these up on Friday, so we've had that second meeting with all the subcommittees and had some great conversations about where the drafts stood, and it was great to have a few of the committee members joining those as well to provide some continuity and connection between those subcommittees and our meetings with all of you. 2 last points here that get a bit toward sort of the your role where we are in this moment on this slide, but then also on the next slide we'll talk about some ideas about how the steering committee can continue to have an impact and stay involved even after the plan is completed. So here we're working on incorporating comments from subcommittee meetings. There were a handful of changes that we wanted to make to respond to those groups. I just want to highlight here the second item indented is that since the steering committee public hearing, since we put that draft out for the October 20 public hearing, every change that we've made is in track changes. We've got a working document and everything every change that we've made is in red line, so that when we send an updated draft to all of you, you'll be able to quickly highlight or track down anything that's new. So we want to make sure that there's no confusion about what's been changed. So we try to be very diligent about how we make those updates along the way.
Hey, Simon. Simon, real quick, a question on that. Two questions actually. One is there a way for you either to distinguish the changes you've made kind of recently based on the feedback from the subcommittees versus the input that came prior to that, or not? Or is that asking too much? Or it'd be good just to at least have a list, I think, of what that is, so that we can just sort of, as opposed to, you know what I'm saying, right? I'm just trying to
yeah,
almost some sort of a traceability kind of a matrix, right?
Yeah. Here's one thought, and then Frank, if you've got something else that you want to suggest and override me, that's fine too. Let me talk with Frank and Sylvia and figure out a good way of doing that. I've done that a few different ways, and the trick is finding a way that doesn't create even more confusion. I'll give you one example. One thing that I've done is try to highlight in different colors different changes that are made at different points in time. That's helpful if you can remember which color relates to which change. So I'm not sure that that's the right way to do it, but
even if it's just a different user, technically a different user doing the updates, right? Because that'll show up in a track changes document in a different color, right?
So yes.
If I could add, Pat, one way we've done it, because the comments, I think, right after the public hearing, the ones in writing at any rate, were relatively few. We could summarize those on a page, and then you would know that all the other comments came from the subcommittees. And then you've got a transcript of each, not a transcript, but a summary of each subcommittee meeting. So if we provided you a listing of the comments from the public hearing, that would be another way to do it that I think might be less confusing.
Right.
And you have a document all in red, all the changes are in red, as Simon said, but
Yep.
you'll know that the ones on a one-page list are from the public hearing.
Yeah, Pat, what you suggested, the challenge there is that Sylvia and I have both already made some changes.
Okay. That's fine.
So
That's what I kind of figured, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think the other thing though that would go along with that is, it'd be good to I've seen a couple of the summaries of the subcommittee meetings, right? It'd be good to get all those in a location, maybe tagged to the Google Doc so we can track those back, and then to get that most recent update of the entire document, right?
Right. Okay.
Because we don't have that yet, right? And it doesn't have the what we've got so far doesn't have the actual content in the action plan. I know you said you're working on that this week and get that out.
Yeah,
but,
exactly. Yeah, so that's that we're working on this week, and then just as we note here, the changes from the subcommittee meeting. So that we do have to get to you.
So just to make sure I'm hearing it right, so you're going to finish finalizing the whatever subcommittee notes are not done in addition to those track changes that.
Melissa, I think if I could have Sylvia just clarify there, I think Sylvia, you've done them all except one, right?
Actually, I think we need to send out the last two. I separated internally, so they're ready actually. So it's just.
So we should go ahead and send those tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you said that those are being summarized, the notes, as opposed to just.
No, there's notes, Melissa. I'm sorry for the confusion. After each subcommittee meeting, Sylvia has been doing a summary of those meetings, and you've got them all except two.
Right.
One of them might have been going out today, so we'll send the other two tomorrow. So those you will all have.
Okay.
In other words.
In hindsight's 2020, I think it's unfortunate that we didn't, record those subcommittee meetings so that we'd have a bit more readily available reflection on those, because just from a personal point of view, I know that subcommittee input was supposed to be a key strong point for fueling the larger steering committee discussion. So I guess the sooner we can get those, the better, and the more detail and reflective of the conversations that happen in those subcommittees, the better as well.
Yeah, actually, you have them all except these last two that
Right.
you attended actually on
Right.
Thursday and Friday. So we'll
Right.
get those to you tomorrow.
Yeah, I attended it, but I'm talking about for the larger committee.
Yes,
So,
we'll get
yeah.
them to everyone tomorrow.
Okay.
And then we were going to suggest, we're sort of looking at the calendar and working toward what we think we have our next briefing scheduled with the trustees on January 13th. We were going to suggest if you all are able to get any additional comments back to us by December 15th, and that would give us time toward the end of the month, early January, to incorporate those any of your comments into that draft that we then transmit to the Board of Trustees. We've given ourselves a deadline of January 8th in advance of that January 13th briefing, so that the trustees have the document for a few days before we meet with them. And then the way that I think about it is that the steering committee draft, once we work through all these red lines, that will be sort of frozen in time at a certain point, right? Once we get all of your last comments. And that will become the final steering committee draft. That goes to the trustees. We preserve those. We have a version of that that's all in red line, but we accept all the changes so that we then have a clean draft, so that we then start another round of changes. Right now, the draft is with the Board of Trustees. They need to get prepared and get the draft prepared and be comfortable with it for the public hearing draft. So any changes that they make before the public hearing, we would then do in a new document in track changes. So there's sort of a moment in time where we sort of clean everything up so that we can see what's new from that next round, and that would be the trustees public hearing draft. So that's just a bit of I've got a next step slide coming up in 2 slides, but this gives a little bit of the sort of behind the scenes workings that we're working on with all of you. Before I get to that, I just wanted to talk about this slide briefly, because we think it's important, and it's something that we've heard. I don't know that we've talked about it with everybody, but we've heard from some of you, I think, about an interest in somehow maintaining a role for the steering committee on an ongoing basis. It's something that a lot of communities do. Not everybody does, but a lot of communities do. And it can be a very effective way to have an advisory body in place to essentially help monitor implementation, keep track of what's been done, what needs to be done, and provide input to the Board of Trustees on how that can happen. As Frank mentioned before, we would recommend that the plan be updated again in 10 years. But that doesn't mean that you don't look at it until 10 years from now. And so one suggestion is that, if the village wanted to do this, they could establish you all as a standing steering committee and essentially provide an annual review on status of implementation. That's why this chapter 10 it can be so useful. It makes it much easier when you provide that annual review to go through item by item. Have we done this yet? Yes, we can check it off. This other item, we haven't done it. Are we on schedule? What do we need to do in order to pull that off? So it makes it much easier, we think, to work through all of these recommendations. We would recommend that it's an annual review, but that's of course up to the village and all of you how you do this. We hope that it could streamline implementation and monitoring of implementation of the plan going forward. And just the last slide here, then we can open it up for discussion. We wanted to run through all of the sort of dates and timelines that we've got in our minds to get our way through adoption. We are of course here December 7th, meeting with all of you. We just met with the trustees last week to brief them. Frank mentioned we're working on the EIS with a mid-December or December 15 date to get a draft to staff, and then we can finalize that into early next year. This item here would be that January 13th meeting with the Board of Trustees. So that's when we would work toward finalizing that trustees public hearing draft. Right. Make sure I didn't miss anything on the left over here. The draft would be referred to the planning board. We think when it's just about done toward the end of January, when the trustees set the public hearing, it would also be referred to the county planning department. And then we would expect to work through this process of finalizing the plan in the EIS, any final changes to the zoning code updates. We would meet with the trustees after the public hearing. What did we hear? Are there any substantive changes that we need to make? We'd probably meet with them again as we get a next draft in place to make sure that we're on the right track. Make any final changes based on comments of the trustees, and then we've penciled in late May as a time when, if everything stays on schedule, the trustees may be in a position to adopt the plan. Frank, is there anything you wanted to add on this? Just want to make sure I didn't miss anything.
No, I think this gives the big picture. It's a minor detail, but in the yellow on the very bottom, we wanted to give the trustees plenty of time because they also have to accept as complete the final generic environmental impact statement. So we're hoping they could do that at their April meeting. And then we could draft up the findings. They're called seeker findings, so that when they go to adopt, they can make those findings first. They have to actually, and then adopt the plan or adopt with any final revision they wish to make. But basically that's the whole sort of whole remaining picture into next year, into 2021. And I think, Simon, that is our last slide, right?
Yeah, so.
Could you go back to that, please?
Oh yeah, go.
Can I just,
Sorry about that.
sorry, Simon, can I just ask a quick question? And Frank also.
Absolutely.
So just taking a look at the timeline, is there any appetite among the steering committee members to, after the Board of Trustees has taken another look at this in January, to actually have one more steering committee meeting to sort of synthesize what that feedback is? I know that it ultimately, lands with trustees and not the steering committee, but I just wonder if that wouldn't be one extra opportunity to sort of, close the loop.
Maddie, if I could just say there, and I would defer, of course, to Stuart on this. The state law is set up so that the steering committee is a comprehensive plans advisory committee to the trustees. So that's possible. I think it's reasonable to say that state law anticipates that once the committee does send the draft to the trustees, it is then in the trustees' hands. However, having said that, there's nothing, the state law does not prohibit the continuation of the committee, which we're recommending. We think that, but I don't think it should, I would just suggest for clarity purposes that it not go back to the committee again. There's no mention of that in state law. I've not seen that done anywhere else. What I have seen done is the committee would remain active. In other words, they would go or participate, particularly perhaps Pat and Melissa representing the committee at trustee meetings. And then of course at the public hearing.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's reasonable to expect that the steering committee is going to want to stay involved at a minimum, Melissa and Pat for some time, as Frank mentioned. That being said, I think that there might still be more work to do. So.
Right. I guess in that regard, I guess the question would be, what other flexibilities are around that first draft that's proposed for January 8th as far as timeline? If it is uncustomary for it to go back and forth, then what would be the other leeway to extend that a bit more if necessary, just given the fact that there are some variables still to be processed as far as giving a final recommendation as a complete committee?
What we've suggested, Melissa, is that the committee, stay involved, and then also we thought it was worth asking the trustees or the village or yourselves asking the trustees that the committee be made a recognized into the future too, so that as the plans, as Simon said, once it's adopted and the first year anniversary, that the committee would come back and advise the trustees, on things that haven't been done. So I think, but I should be clear that
Okay, so perhaps then,
sorry.
Is there then room for the committee to meet once more before it goes to the trustees?
Oh, yes, I think so. I think if the committee wanted to have a, study hall or another meeting by yourselves, I think that's perfectly appropriate. As long as you can get a draft to the trustees. You might want to do that later this year, early January, but I think that's okay. But once it does go to the trustees, it is their document. And then the committee would be still advisory to that document, But I think what I have not seen, I've never seen in all our, all our work in Westchester over the last 30 years is bouncing back and forth. It shouldn't, I think I just haven't seen that. I think it would cause, it would be extremely unusual. I think state law does not anticipate that. It anticipates that committee hold its hearing, and then after its hearing, and then when it's got a complete draft, that it send that to the trustees. That's what state law had anticipated the way it's written.
I think that's fair enough, Frank. That makes perfect sense. And I don't mean to, reinvent the wheel and, completely change the whole process. But I just feel, to sort of echo what Melissa said, if there are a couple of things that still haven't been, T's crossed, I's dotted, that perhaps the steering committee might want to meet, the first week in January before that meeting on the 13th. That was my suggestion.
Yeah, so I want to kind of jump in here before we get too far down this road. I think that, just, we don't have enough of the board members here to go too deep in this conversation, but I want to just get a sense from the four that we do have here. Is there any sentiment that, you're ready to send this to the board of trustees right now? Not saying how far away it is, but.
Who are you directing that to, Jaime?
I'm directing it to the steering committee.
Oh, okay. You said board. What was the question again? Because I thought I made it clear that and Pat and I had kind of had a discussion as well as far as if we're not technically comfortable as a committee to say, here you go, here's the final draft, it's yours now. What are the flexibilities around extending that out? Because I think if we're talking here about the finality of it all, once we give it to them, then I think that's even more room for scrutiny on this proposed timeline that we're looking at in front of us.
So yes, I'll be a little more blunt, and Melissa and Melissa and I are on the same page here in terms of kind of where we think we are. So with it in terms of I agree. I think that there should be another meeting or two with the steering committee. I think specifically just to validate the changes that have come out of the subcommittee meetings, right? Which we haven't seen those changes in the document yet. To validate the action plan, which we don't have the content and the table there yet in terms of prioritization, kind of near, medium, and far. And then I think that the third thing is that we're still kind of in the background and going through what are potential zoning solutions to some of the challenges, right? And I think that we're kind of going we're continuing conversations in the study halls and through some of the analysis that the steering committee is doing, right? And so for me, right, having not seen all of the updated edits, having not seen the content and the action plan, and knowing that there's still we got a lot of really good feedback this week in terms of challenges and potential options for solutions to some of the challenges, right? So without all that, I personally am not in a position to turn something over to the trustees yet, right? So
Right, and we're asking for written comments from the steering committee by next week. And if they don't have the whole picture, then what are they commenting on, right? Yeah. So,
Melissa, in answer to your question, you would be commenting on the draft thus far. You don't have to do that. I agree I see where you and Pat are. We're perfectly comfortable. If you legitimately should have another meeting if you feel you should. We're perfectly happy with that. But we just wanted to conclude tonight with, you've got the whole draft now. You've got it in place. Chapters 1 through 10, you've got the draft. What we'll be doing, as Pat said, is giving you, we thought, for instance, you might want to take a crack yourselves at, in the action plan, we've said, who does what,
it's mostly the trustees and the staff, and then what's the deadline. But we'll take a crack at that. We'll give it to you at the end of the week. And you'll have all the subcommittee, there's only 2 subcommittee drafts, notes that you're missing. We'll give you those tomorrow. So you'll have everything. Everything will be wrapped up, but you need to digest it, take your time, and have another meeting or study hall or what you'd like to do.
So sorry, Jeff, let me just clarify one thing, and then
Go ahead.
Then I'll cede the floor. Sorry, and I may have missed this in one of the earlier readings, right? But had you been looking for us to fill in the active action plan?
No, we'll take a crack at it so that we get it out to you this week. It's fairly simple to do for us. So we'll do it first, Pat. We'll just.
Well, no, I know you are, and you had said it earlier, but had you been looking for us to take a crack at that? Because I had missed that.
No, we were debating in-house that.
Okay.
Do that. We were prepared to do it tonight, but I don't think we need to.
Okay, thanks.
We have it all set up. We have more slides if you wanted to go through that chapter by chapter. But
yeah, if I remember the way we have been doing these meetings throughout, BFJ would present us a slideshow with kind of a sketch of the content of the chapters, and then it would usually be subsequent to that meeting where you had the steering committee feedback that you would then send around the draft of the chapter. I may have that wrong. And I know I was looking ahead to the slideshow here. I see you do have slides about the action plan. So I guess my thought is to follow up on what Pat is saying, if we go through all that tonight, or at least there's slides about summarizing the objectives from each chapter, and then we get that action plan. I think one of the very useful things we've been doing as a steering committee is reading the chapters closely and getting together to discuss them. So I think if we're sort of following that same pattern, it makes sense to circle back with one more, at least what we've been doing, we're calling a study hall, to circle back and take a close look at any new content that's going into the plan, including, the action agenda and the executive summary, or whatever chapter 1, whatever the proper name for that is. But I agree, we should take a whole nother look at everything altogether as a committee.
No, that's good. And Jeff, I just wanted to emphasize, you have everything now.
I
you really have
frequently go to Ossining tomorrow and look at the chapters and see that many changes have been made over time.
Yep. And that's very.
But we don't have those final 2 chapters. So I guess my point is this seems to be following the same process we've been using all along. But we need to, as a committee, come back and look at the text of those final 2 chapters before we can say we've done what we were supposed to do.
Yes. No disagreement at all. I think that will be a good idea for the committee to have another meeting, and that way you have everything. You'll have time to digest it all.
And Jeff, I totally agree with you. And Melissa and I agree there. Like, we think that there's another conversation, actually potentially 2, like one conversation, if it's tonight or if it's, study hall around chapters 1 and 10, and then just confirming, like the core of 7, 8, 9, right? Is kind of just making sure that we're locked in there. And then potentially, there's a zoning discussion as well, right? And potential changes to zoning. I think there's a conversation there as well. But I guess for me,
Pat, may I interject there? If you could concentrate first on the plan.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's what the trustees are going to have a public hearing on.
Yep.
It's the plan. And so that would allow them at least to move forward with that. Otherwise, everything gets delayed. And I think what will happen is planning fatigue will set in.
Yeah.
So if you concentrate on the plan first, get that to the trustees, then we could meet with you again on the zoning, get any comments you have, revise anything you have, and it goes to the trustees.
Well, I think well, maybe I'm mistaken, but I think what's being referenced here is, there are conversations that have to do with the plan itself, that there are some discussions to be made for that chapter. So I don't think it's something I get the setting the boundaries between those two discussions, and how the zoning discussion is technically separate, but there is a zoning chapter, right? And so I
Yeah,
think
there's a land use and zoning chapter, Melissa.
right.
Yep.
The difference there is, just so you know, the difference in a comprehensive plan is it just outlines in that chapter 3, which is the chapter, it just outlines what it is that you recommend. It doesn't go into the detail or the zoning language.
Right.
Yep.
I'm aware of that. Thank you. I'm
Yeah.
just saying that I think all those points are valid, and that we do need to have more, we do need to make sure we're bringing those into the discussion as well.
Yes, yep.
Yeah. I think we're in violent agreement.
Yep. Good.
So,
If I could ask, just from a timing standpoint, because Maddie, I think we have tried to get on the agenda for the 13th. That's right?
Before we start setting that date, I just think that I don't, maybe y'all are not hearing it. I'm definitely hearing it. I don't think the steering committee has not decided whether or not they're ready to move it on. And so if we put a date up like the 13th, that might work. But I think that there are a couple of other conversations that need to be scheduled between now and then. We need to make sure that the steering committee is ready to do that. So the problem with this process up to now has been that we have had this really rigid schedule, and we have by and large stuck to it. But I think that even though, Frank, you expressed a concern about planner fatigue, I think that we're on the last stretch run of this. I think we're very close. I think that we might make that January 13th timeline, but we don't need to make that decision. I don't think that Maddie or the board of trustees, anybody needs to make that decision until later in this month. So we have a
Yeah,
couple
no, that's fine. That's up to you. I just think another meeting, I'm hearing what you say. I agree. I think that another meeting with another committee meeting or, study hall.
study hall, yeah.
Have that. The only thing I'm urging is that we did make a change in our contract as at the request of the village manager to disaggregate, in her words, the plan from the zoning so that we could get a plan to the trustees. And we're willing to work in February or so on with the committee if you're still, if you've got.
I think that's fine. I think respectfully, contract discussions probably are best left with the village manager at a more appropriate time.
Yeah, no. I just wanted to say that so the committee knew. They have a right to know. And we were asked to do something. We took the extra time to get all these subcommittees done, and we've done that. And what I'm getting at is that if we can agree to get something done on the plan in January, that's wonderful. I think you're able to do that. You could have another meeting among yourselves, a study group, and another committee meeting, and that would be great.
Yeah, I think the goal is,
in agreement. I just don't want to see the trustees have to wait, indefinitely for a plan.
Yeah, I think, I don't want to speak on behalf of the entire committee here. I'm not a committee member, but I do think we have a full committee now. We're going to lose Jeff come January. I think there probably is some internal desire to try to not have to deal with losses to our committee members as time goes by. So I do think there's some urgency to get this done over the next couple of weeks. But
yeah, no, that's great. That's great, Jaime. We're perfectly happy to hear that. Yeah.
I don't want to guarantee anything.
And if I can just put my 2 cents on here, Frank, I'm okay with the suggestions that Pat and Melissa made in here, and I cannot say that I'm on behalf of the village board because I'm only one voice, but I can definitely talk to the rest of my colleagues and explain the reason why we think will be appropriate for us to take some additional time if that has to be taken. I'm sure at least I'll be in favor of this. I can only say for myself, but I will have to speak with the rest of the board. Again, I want to get it right. You know, I don't want it. I want to make sure that we get it right. I want to make sure that the steering committee feels comfortable enough with the decisions that, with the recommendations that they're going to be making to the village board are actually, you know, they're all in agreement with that. I don't want to have something that it comes with doubts, something that it has come with not really with practical recommendations. I want to make sure we all have, you know, we all addressing all the issues. I think there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot more information that I think is going to be coming out of the study halls that will be appropriate to be part of the potential solutions to be part of this comprehensive plan. But I can, again, I'm in favor of that, but I'm only one of 5. And again, I will talk to the rest of my colleagues, and I'm sure they'll be able to understand and accommodate this.
Can I ask I didn't want to cut you off, Manny, if you weren't done, but just a question. I was looking at the timeline, and you have the current next steps shows written comments from the steering committee by December 15th, and then January 8th, transmitting the steering committee draft to the trustees. And it makes sense that once we give you our comments, you would need some turnaround time.
Yes.
But so that basically that's the dates right now. We're talking about whether or not those are feasible. I don't know that we would have our final comments for you in the 15th is 8 days away, but I think we could probably meet and give you at least comments on something.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, if we kind of work on different chapters and stagger it to you, is it still possible to be, I'm kind of asking this to my fellow committee members, is it possible to have this, you know, done with a little bit more time, maybe some extensions built in, but we can still get BFJ having it finally written that we can transmit it on January 8th, and bearing in mind that BFJ needs some lead time to incorporate the comments.
I guess so I think we'll be close, right? I think we'll be close, right? In terms of the comments. I agree. I don't think we'll be there by the 15th, right? Simply because, you know, we'll get the, that's next Tuesday, right? And we'll get the, you know, the final details on 1 and 10, you know, at some point this week, plus hopefully updated drafts of the other ones with the changes from the subcommittees this week, right? But, you know, a week after that, you know, maybe the first week in January, it seems totally reasonable to me, right?
Yeah, Pat, I just want to add one thing here. So first of all, the 15th wasn't set in stone. We hear you. You know, we wanted to put a date out, and you know, obviously we want to be reasonable about that and make sure you all have time to go through it.
Yeah.
One thought, which is it's sort of a process question for all of you. You know, the way that we get comments from committees is always different. If you all send us, you know, 8 different documents, and we have to sort of call through, are all the comments consistent? Does a comment from one of you contradict a comment from another one of you? That takes a lot of work, and we can do that. You know, if that's the process that you guys want, that's absolutely fine. If you all are sort of going through individually, that's sometimes how it works. However, if one of the things that you guys are trying to do is sort of, you know, get your heads together and provide one set of consensus comments, that's much easier for us to incorporate, and we can do it more quickly. So again, I don't want to tell you
That's fair.
Yeah, you know, I don't want to dictate to you guys, but it sounds like through the study halls, that's the direction that you're you're going, and that it does make it easier for us to incorporate things, because we're getting one, one set of comments, and we know that we don't have to make sure that we're reconciling, comments from, from multiple committee members. So I mean, am I reading that correctly? Is that what you're working toward, or what's your thought on that from a process standpoint?
I mean, that's pretty much the format that's been followed, is condensing, notes and feedback from, I mean, I don't see that as being a big hurdle. I think my focus point is focusing on this final draft deadline date. That's really, everything else seems flexible. It's that seems very final, and I think that's what we're kind of mulling over. The irony is that we're talking about the need for more time. We're spending so much time talking about the need for more time. That's not lost on me. And so I'd just like to, make sure that we're coming to a consensus that we need to push that date out, that final draft submission date out. Everything else in between that is flexible, I think. How we get the information to BFJ or condense the comments and everything, flexible. I think the only thing that's really, so final here on this timeline is that date of submitting to the trustees. And from what I can tell, everyone's kind of in agreement that there needs to be some flexibility there.
Oh, Maddie, can I ask, I think your second trustee meeting in January is the 27th. Is that right?
If we are going for a work session, that would be the 27th. Yes.
I'm sorry, go ahead again.
Yep, the 13th is the first one, and then the second one is the 27th.
So we could be on the trustees meeting on the 27th.
That would also seem like an option, yes.
Yeah, okay. So Pat and Melissa, that would give you additional time. You could have another committee meeting in maybe early January. Everybody has a chance to have read everything then, and maybe aim for the trustee meeting on the 27th of January. We could do that.
Yeah, I want to mention that, like, a lot of these study halls are, it's less about just reading them. It's also about for people who are in these steering committees that are not necessarily familiar with all the aspects. So sort of coming together and having an understanding. Some of the comments are certainly going to be modifications, but I think a lot of it is just the committee feeling like they have ownership over this product that they're handing to the Board of Trustees.
Yeah.
To know what they're looking at.
As you probably know, Jaime, what's going to happen, just so I fill the committee in, is a lot of people really see that BOT public hearing, that's where there's going to be another round of comments. It doesn't matter whether the committee spends now 1 month or 3 months, there's still going to be another process which is mandated by law. So I think what I've been hearing from the committee members, Jaime, is they might be able to do this in another, in January. So I'm just saying, rather than try to meet the January 13th deadline, maybe we could move the getting it to the BOT so that we could meet with the BOT in January 27th. That would give, that's more than a month from now. That would give the committee another time for study hall and committee meeting, which I think Pat and Melissa were talking about. I'm just trying to line up, a fallback date for the trustees. Would that work, Pat? Do you think that would give you more time?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's because the reality is, I think we're close, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think we all agree, and you're close. You just need this additional time, and we're happy with that. I'm kind of suggesting maybe we, maybe it's deadlines and instead of January 13th, go for the 27th.
Right. Because I think the other piece for me, right, is if we are having some good discussions in the background, and we're getting some really good feedback, and the reality is if we take an extra week or two, I think the product will be that much better. And it'll be that we'll be sure that it reflects the feedback and that the value is appropriately communicated and understood, and how it positively impacts the people in the village, right, is positively understood a little bit better. And in the end, I think that hopefully would make the second iteration with the VBOT a little less, a little less complex, right? Well,
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you. And that's why I was suggesting take the extra 2 weeks that you just suggested. We could move the BOT meeting
That we attend, cancel the 13th and just put it on the 27th to give you that time.
Maybe at the end of this meeting, I know that you have more in your presentation, but we could, as a steering committee, just make sure we plot out whatever dates we can meet. And there actually was a time where we met over Zoom for like a lunchtime call. So maybe we can, after the presentation, we can just meet and try and get as much, on the calendar as we can to get this done.
yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's terrific. I think that's a good plan because, you're able to then focus in on it, and
There's nothing new, nothing really additional coming, so you have it, and then you'll be able to take that time. That's good. I think it's a good plan. Actually, this, unless you wanted to go through, we have some, unless you wanted to go through particular chapters, this was the end of our presentation. We have some, what I call backup slides with that, show you the strategies by chapter.
Yeah, we hadn't intended to go, strategy by strategy. That might take us all night. But if anyone had, we wanted to have it in here in case anyone had specific questions or wanted to.
Okay, because I was looking at those slides, I thought that we were.
Yeah.
about to go through all
Yeah, Jeff, we have them all, but it was a matter of how long you all wanted to go this evening, and
Yep.
Yeah, I just in general, I know we've been talking about seeing all of the objectives in one place, all the different strategies, and they're at least here in these slides. And
and also in the 2 chapters we sent you, I was trying to highlight on Friday, chapter 1 and chapter 10. They give you all of it in one, because Manny made a big impression on me anyway, and wanting to have everything in one place where you could read it as a summary. So it's chapter 1, which gives you all the strategies, and then chapter 10, which gives you all the action items.
Yep.
I'm just looking at the action agenda. Some of these are very obvious who's going to be the responsible party and things like that.
yes, yeah. And actually, we could, if you'd like, we could take a crack at that in the next few days and give it to you, and feel free to change it in any way.
Yeah, I think what's usually helpful on that, because there's so many items to go through, is if, we'll try to fill them in. We probably won't get it perfect, right? You all will look at it and say, no, this should happen sooner. No, that you missed this other group who should be involved in that, that strategy. We wouldn't expect it to be, perfect the first time around, but we can take a pass, send it around to all of you and to staff. You'll have comments, and the trustees, when the document gets to them, will probably have additional tweaks there as well.
Yeah.
I think the one thing that would be most helpful in that, just looking through the grid, is really the time frame, because some of that is not, some of that's about just spreading out the work, and what's reasonable for a community to do, because I look at a lot of this stuff, I'm like, let's just do it right away. But some of it maybe has to be, done in a certain order, one building upon the next. So the time frame, I think, is the one thing that could be, subject to the most, useful input from your expertise. And then, many things are just clearly, board of trustees or, whoever is the responsible party. That seems almost obvious, but.
Yeah, I think, for me, and just to build on that a little bit, I think that I do think that the time frame, in the way I was thinking about the time frame, was sequencing, right? I do think that there's value in the sequencing of it, like you had mentioned, right? And then the other thing for me that I thought would be that to try and call out in the responsible party is the we talked this week. There was a lot of conversation in the subcommittee meetings about collaboration. Yes. And about that's something that really makes Ossining a really great place, right? Is that you get a lot of organizations, you get a lot of people collaborating in a way that doesn't necessarily happen in other municipalities. And so, for me, one of the things that I would want to try and work in somehow is bullet on, okay, if this is who's responsible, maybe this is who they're collaborating with, right? One or two of them, right? To make sure that and it's not going to be for everything, right? There's not going to be a collaboration for everything, but some of them definitely are. Like the waterfront, you're definitely going to need, you're going to call out collaboration with MTA, and you're going to call out collaboration with the town, and things like that, right? So for me, that's another just kind of thing for us all to be thinking through as we go through the draft, the drafting of the action agenda.
Yeah, it's a good point, Pat, that many times it might be not just one responsible party, but maybe several.
Well, no, because there's a responsible party, right? Someone's got to lead it. But
yeah,
but there are other people. There are other people that are involved, right? It's like you think about a RACI chart, right? Sorry, responsible, accountable, communicated to and collaborated with and informed, however you want to call it, right? It's it's that collaboration piece that I'm trying to call out, in addition to the person who's responsible for making it happen.
Yep.
Yeah, you might want to. There's one of these for every almost every chapter. So we happen to pick out chapter 5 here that you're looking. So, the one that has a lot of collaboration, of course, the very first one. So there's a lot of different people that might be involved there, as we listed, and it's sort of ongoing. But then if you drop down, as you said, strategy 5.3.5, improve the aesthetics of Route 9. Well, that one kind of is more. There's clearly a lead there, New York DOT. And there's on these other zoning, all of the zoning rests with the Board of Trustees.
Yep.
Can I just ask one other question? Because I did watch the meeting with the Board of Trustees last week, and this kind of goes. This is like I have a sort of process question, because I know that we're splitting the comprehensive plan and the zoning, instead of being on parallel tracks, sort of putting them sequentially. There were a lot of comments about the MF3 zone, whether 3 and 4 families should be permitted by conditional use permit in the T zone. There were some comments I heard from the Board of Trustees, as well as there were some members of the public who joined the conversation. And I know that we have in the zoning chapter, there is an objective that speaks to some of that, but it doesn't really fill out some more of the details of like what an MF3 zone might look like when you get down to like the nitty gritty of like the density and how it would vary in setbacks and things from, you know, another zone, or whether it be, there was also talk of like a floating affordable housing zone or something that could be like an overlay zone. So is the idea that all those details would get flushed out after the comprehensive plan is passed, and that would be in like phase 2 of this sequence? Or is there anything else that needs to be, since you're, you know, making the final changes to the chapters, anything else that needs to be said here to set the stage for that?
Well, as a result of our conversations with Karen, what we did is take the extra time, you know, for the committee for this meeting tonight. And then I think we'll take some extra time now in another couple of weeks so that you guys have, you know, you all have time to review the plan. It doesn't mean that the zoning is not still there. We've done a draft of the, which we've gone over with the trustees and you all, of the overlay districts. And we did a walking tour, you know, of downtown, which some of you were on, actually quite a few of you were on, and the trustees. So we've got the overlay district done in draft form. And as you know, downtown, Jeff, and then on Croton Avenue. And then we did a draft of the T-zone. Those were the two things that were in the RFP for us and in our contract. The MF3 came up later. Actually, I credit Jaime with it, and a walking tour between Jonathan and the village manager and Jaime, suggesting that there might be this other zone that we also developed. So we did develop that text. We sent it to everybody. It's done. And I think that that one we would see as something that could be zoned at a later date by the trustees. That's how we've discussed it with the trustees. We don't know where that could go. We think it might go in areas around the downtown and in areas possibly part of the T-zone or so on. But those things rest primarily, in my mind, I'll just give you my thought on it. They rest primarily with the trustees. In other words, to be blunt about it, what state law says is the trustees are supposed to set up a advisory comprehensive plan committee, not an advisory zoning committee. It's supposed to be an advisory comprehensive plan committee. We wanted to share everything with you and get your thoughts on that. And then Karen made the suggestion, look, let's concentrate on the plan, get it done, not at the expense of the zoning, but if the zoning has to come at a second public hearing that the trustees have, that would be fine. So I think that's what is in our minds right now as a result of that. So that could come, you know, we're looking at what we were told to look at in our contract in the EIS. The EIS is going to have in it the overlay districts in downtown and Croton Avenue. It also is going to have in it the T-zone. And we've shown you all that in terms of the build out. And we've gone through all the details of the build out with Jaime. Jaime's been very, very, very helpful in that. We've gone through the build out. So that's all going to be in the EIS so that the trustees, if they wish to move on the zoning, those zoning items will be covered in the EIS. So that's kind of where we are right now.
All right, so just as a follow-up question to that, some of the items that are being discussed are all of those things that you just mentioned, but I think that there are some potential changes in the S75 district. There are some potential changes to rezoning of certain parcels that are maybe miszoned currently, transferring them over to another district. And then there are considerations that have been discussed in the meetings about the possibility of making the floating or the overlay zone in the downtown sort of, rather than being an opt-in, make it a permanent one. There's been discussions about going from 5 feet in height to 6 feet in height. So to, my concern is that these are kind of substantive changes, especially ones that haven't been discussed prior to this, like adjustments to the S75 district. And
Yeah.
so, the concern is that, and we've had this internally, is that if this EIS, once the EIS gets to it, it's not considering all these matters that, say we totally we stop talking about zoning and you finish the EIS and the EIS gets done, the GEIS gets done. The zoning is determined from the steering committee that they do want to make all these different changes. Can you go back and adjust the GEIS so that once the final GEIS is done, that the Board of Trustees, without any further extra environmental review, will be able to approve all of those zoning changes, not just the ones that you mentioned, but all the other ones that are currently being looked at by the steering committee? Because I think that's one of the big pauses that we have. But if you're saying that that's fine, that you can modify the EIS later, or that it's totally irrelevant, and that the Board of Trustees, then I need to just understand that.
That's a good question that we've been mulling over too. And I appreciated watching you and Pat go through last Monday, the S75. So we decided that in the EIS, actually that was new to us, as you know, Jaime. You and I hadn't had an opportunity to discuss that. So we were watching that at the same time as the trustees. And we looked at that and said, those are good ideas. And as best I understood the S75, so maybe we could take them one at a time. The S75, as I understand, I think we had pointed out very early on, based on the meetings with the building inspector, that there's a lot of nonconformity in that zone. And now you've really gone through that carefully and identified that. But the bottom line to it is that you would be making, as I understand it, life easier, which would be a real plus for residents in the S75. But in terms of an environmental, and I've written this draft up in the EIS, and you'll be getting a draft of it in about a week now, week and a half. That doesn't have an impact, a significant adverse impact, in the sense that we're not increasing density. It still remains a single family district, but it makes improvement investment in those homes more likely. And I think it's a very good idea, but I think the EIS can cover it that way, qualitatively, that there's no real increase in density, and therefore there's not an increase necessarily in public school children or, in traffic. So that one I thought was something that could possibly be handled. The T-zone, as you know, we already have that. We are discussing that in the EIS. The MF3, as you know, we had made, when you suggested that idea, Jaime, we developed that with you. And what we said early on was that one would be in the EIS and it would be described as a text change. But where that's mapped, we didn't know. I think the trustees have not, don't have a clear view of that yet. So that one, we would say in the EIS, here it is, but if we don't know where it's going to be mapped at, at the present time, then you would have to follow up the EIS with and by the way, at the end of the EIS, there's going to be a chapter, it's mandated by state law, section 6, says where you have to do a follow-up seeker evaluation. So we were going to say to the MF3, yes, there would need to be a follow-up seeker evaluation when and if the trustees decided to map it in a particular place. Right now, I think, it's a new zoning text, which we've sent to everyone, but there's no indication of where it might be mapped. So
yeah, I guess.
Yeah, sorry, Jeff.
Oh, no, I don't want to cut you off, Frank.
So I was just trying to say, in answer to Jaime's question, a couple of things. One, as you know from the history of this, now we've gone into the origins of this. We've had several slides on it. Rika, for instance, has asked that question a few times. What's in our contract
just to be clear, is the overlay district and the two-family district, period. That's what's in our contract to develop. Now, it was only downtown also. The trustees through the mayor asked us if we'd expand that to Croton Avenue. We did. Then other questions came up and we had to say, as I think the trustees realized, some people said, oh, wow, gee, let's do an overlay district for North Highland Avenue, for northern section of Route 9, or let's do something new in the southern district. Those things are not in our contract, to be very honest. And I think the mayor understood that on a walking tour. She said, absolutely, Frank, we understand that. If something else is going to be proposed at the last minute, we would have to do that later. We're trying to get in what is in the contract, quite frankly, done in a timely manner so that, you know, we can get there next spring. Because it goes into the summer where we've learned by experience that anything that goes much beyond a year to 18 months is difficult. But we're trying to be flexible. In other words, we can address in the EIS, we're going to, Jaime, the S75, which is not in our contract and is brand new. It's presented last week for the first time that I'm aware of. And we can do that. I think we can accommodate that. We're trying to accommodate these new changes. But on the other hand, something that's brand new and has not been discussed by the committee or the trustees, I think we have to put off till later. I don't think there's anything I've heard of that is not covered, that we can't cover.
Yeah, I guess my question is really just geared toward, these are going to have, some of this stuff is going to have to take place. It has to take place by the trustees after the comprehensive plan is done. And I'm talking about the zoning issues, and there are some new ideas that have come up during the process as well. But what I just want to make sure that because the zoning follows the plan,
Right.
have we at least identified the issues? Maybe we don't have all the objectives, but for instance, I think the S75 issues, the levels of nonconformity there, arose from your analysis of nonconforming properties throughout the village.
Yes.
And so my question is, have we just at least identified the issue and put it in the plan, at least as an issue that's been identified? Maybe we don't go the full analysis like you're contractually asked to do with respect to the two overlay areas and the T-zone, but that we identify the issue and maybe leave it open enough that the Board of Trustees has that textual base in the comprehensive plan when they go to look at that. And that might be an entirely different, you know, environmental review question, whether it's proposing, you know, significant adverse environmental consequences, et cetera. But have we just sort of since we went through this and we identified these issues, are we just textually setting ourselves up to have that
Yes.
ability in the future?
I think in that one, yes, we've identified it in chapter 3. Jonathan's tried to identify that non-conforming use. But what Jaime's done is taken it further now, and we've now started to write that up in the EIS so that we clarify that. On that one, I think it's an excellent idea to do. We also think does not have significant adverse environmental impact. So we're saying that in the EIS on the S75, and that we'll get that out to everybody. So that one, yes, Jeff, we're trying to do that.
Yeah, so I guess maybe, and this might be something that we as a steering committee can discuss in one of the study halls or something, but maybe I thought that the non-conforming lot analysis you did was compelling, that it wasn't, certainly it highlighted something that we all, many of us intuitively understood about the restrictions of the T-zone, but that it actually went beyond that. So look, if something is to be done, my question is, and maybe we can suggest to that chapter, that the non-conforming analysis identified other areas of the village that, and use language that can, leave the door open for the Board of Trustees to say, the comprehensive plan identified this, we're going to take a look at it now.
We agree. Yeah, we'll have it in the plan, but also in the EIS. And I see that one as something that really can be accommodated and accommodated now. So that I think we can do. I was saying to Jaime last week that I thought this was a very, very good, helpful analysis.
So if it's in the EIS, then they're covered both ways.
Yes, I think they're covered both ways. Now, I do want to be clear that I don't know all the, if there's more issues on the MF3, that one was always anticipated to be a separate action by the trustees if and when they decided where they might map it. And I've strongly advised that not be a public, the comprehensive plan hearing should not be confused with a zoning hearing at this point, I think, because it would add to confusion. I think it'd be better that the comment that the manager asked us to do was to separate the two. And I think in this instance, the trustees would be able to follow up right away the comprehensive plan adoption with the downtown, as far as I know, and Jaime, you'll have to fill me in on, you have a better feel for it. The trustees would be able to follow up then with the form-based code in both downtown and on Croton Avenue, and they'd be able to follow up on the T-zone. So they would be able to do those two zones. The MF3 has always been seen as a zone that would not be mapped. So on that one, later, if the trustees wanted to do that, and I can see there would be a big discussion on that.
Well, before we go too far,
And just to finish that thought, if I may, Jaime, just to finish the thought, we've always said that one would be a separate seeker analysis. We require an EAF because you don't know where it's going to be zoned.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's reasonable recommendation of how to go about the analysis and implementation of it. The only thing that I would say is that in response to a comment that was made by Trustee Quesada some time ago, he had expressed significant concern about putting something on the books, even if it was just on the books but unmapped, without sort of defining that area. Pat had mentioned later that he thought that if we were to have in the comp plan the MF3 zone, that it was important to identify the areas of the village where it might be appropriate to apply it, because leaving it just in open-ended might not work. And so I think that like the form of the, unfortunately, to talk a little bit about the contract, the form of the contract has gotten us to a point where there's a recommendation that's coming in that sort of leaves this open-ended. But I think that the steering committee, and I do think the trustees would rather not leave it so open-ended. So we do need to end the discussion of the MF3 probably a little bit further than it just being text. It probably needs to have at least some, some recommendations about where it might be appropriate or not. Understanding that the EAF, the environmental review and the application of it is going to come down the road. Understanding that there's still all that aspect. I don't think that just based off of the comments that we've gotten already, that it's okay to leave it open. So we will have to come back to that. And I think that, like, unfortunately, that's not in your contract, so I do understand that. But we need to come to some resolution on that.
Yeah. And Jaime, that's one where, as you have ideas and you develop them, then you could offer guidance to the trustees as to where you think that zone best goes. As you know, we've not looked at any, we have not zeroed in on a particular area for the MF3, only what we had, you had gone around with Jonathan on a couple of avenues and corridors. But I'm hoping that, as you just said, that could be a parallel track, but a different track, and that it not be part of the public hearing in the sense of adopting the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan will have that in it, but
it would be good. My experience in the village so far is that it would be good to do one thing at a time and maybe do the comprehensive plan first because all of these things, they need a very detailed discussion and wide public involvement, which we've been trying to do, of course. But I think if you do the plan first, you get something done, you anticipate these things, and then you flush out like the MF3. I think that's the only thing that, in my mind, at this point that I'm aware of, that would be, subject to a follow-up EAF.
I'm not sure if
everything
anybody
else we
else
can
has any
accommodate.
comments, but I have a couple quick questions, I guess. And so I'm going to start almost from the beginning of the presentation, sure. In regards to the public engagement, when we start opening this to a public feedback, I want to say. So since that, Frank, you'd like to talk about the contract, I want to be clear that that is part of your contract, correct? The engagement of the public, or that's not part of your contract?
Oh, no, Manny, absolutely. The engagement of the public, we're big believers
great,
in.
thank you. So,
Yeah.
but since that part, when we have a public meetings, that's going to be part of your contract. I would like to see more engagement, and hopefully the living situation that we're going through hopefully will be a little bit better than this past few months, obviously, sure, with the pandemic and everything else, and I get all that stuff. What I have seen is, lack of participation, I guess, in the public, and maybe it's because we haven't been pushing this as much as we could have, maybe. I don't know. So I'm going to leave that as a separate conversation. In regards to your contract, as you've been stating it several times in here, you talked about the T-zone, correct? And what kind of recommendations you're supposed to be bringing to the steering committee. But I haven't really seen that much of recommendations in regards to the T-zone. There are areas where, I know Pat, Jaime, Melissa are working on it, but you have it. So I think we should have a separate meeting, an internal meeting, to talk about these items that I feel, at least me personally, as a board trustee, that I feel that hasn't been addressed as part of the contract.
I'm all in favor of that.
Let's table this conversation at least for an internal conversation.
Yes.
Because I think that there's a lot of stuff that unless I'm, and I've been wrong before, and I have no problem admitting when I'm wrong. So I would like to have that conversation internally with our village manager and you, so we can clarify these issues and the concerns that I have.
Yeah, on the T-zone.
Let's do that. And so now I have a general question in regards to the MF3 zone, and that I'm going to kind of piggyback on something that Jaime said. I will hate for me to have in a floating zone, sure, because that leads to interpretation, and that leads to me more like a spot zoning. So that's something that if the steering committee is in support of having this as a part of one of the solutions to send this over to the board, I think it has to be more detail on this. And since that's not part of your contract, I guess we're going to have to, we have to talk to Jaime and kind of figure out a different way or different approach to this. Because I will hate to leave this to be like the interpretation of a board, and then it will have to go in front of the planning board, and they may have a different interpretation. So I want to make sure that the guidelines, I think in general, for any of the recommendations of any of the possible solutions to the comp plan, we should have guidelines.
Yes.
We should have very specific guidelines on what those guidelines mean and look like. Because if we just leave that for interpretation, we all have, if I read a chapter, my interpretation of the chapter it may be different from yours. It may be different from Jaime's. It may be different from Pat. So I want to make sure that whatever the recommendations are or the potential solutions are, It should be some sort of guidelines. So on the last chapter that you have, I think that should be very specific. And I'm talking about that not as a general. So it should be very specific, a very specific path for the village board to accomplish those goals if within the next 10 years. And with that, I'm going to just listen in now.
Well, you've raised three separate items. Manny, let me try in my own way to, limited way to try to address them. You raised an issue on public participation. I mean, on that one, I do feel that you, the village, have done an outstanding job on public participation. You followed all the recommendations of PACE when, you had engaged them. And you not only did the PACE recommendations, but you added the idea of subcommittees and did all of those subcommittees. So just so I can put it in perspective for you, you've got one of the most robust public outreach efforts that I've seen of a master plan in Westchester County. And I'm speaking with some, experience of maybe having done 10 of these in the county in different municipalities. So your public participation effort and outreach by the committee and by the village, I think has been really terrific. But you're also, this happened during a period of COVID. And so it was hard for everyone. I think the real personal meetings we had, the walking tours, I really enjoyed because we were able to meet in person. We were able to talk informally and get to know each other also. So I think on that one, I would just like to give you some comfort level that I have not seen another comprehensive plan that has exceeded your efforts in public participation. The second issue you raised, though, the T-zone, we'd certainly like to have a more detailed discussion with Jaime and with Pat, if you're working on the T-zone, and the building inspector. We want to get that the way you are comfortable with and the way the trustees are, because that we're covering in the DEIS. That has implications. We put it in the build out analysis. So the T-zone, we'd like to very much get back, maybe with the building inspector and Jaime and maybe Pat and so on.
And Melissa.
Working meeting on that, I think, and we can finish that out. The MF3 is something that you're right. I think that's something that maybe Jaime takes the lead on in the MF3. I think it was something that can be developed more. But on the T-zone, we'd like very much to re-engage on that with Jaime.
So just one comment. I think if we're going to have a secondary conversation on the detailed analysis and the T-zone and the S75, it should also include Melissa.
Oh,
she's been involved with all that.
Yeah, whomever you want. I think I think that would be very good.
Yeah.
I know we have, it's getting pretty late here. It's almost 9 o'clock. There are a few other items I imagine y'all want to cover. But if not, Frank, I know that there were some items I think that we want to discuss earlier today. Trustee Quesada, Melissa, and Pat and myself did speak, and I think there were a few items, at least setting up a meeting, like a subsequent meeting with the steering committee at a minimum, or covering some of those items. So is there anything else for the agenda, Frank or Simon, that we needed to cover before that?
No, I don't think so. I think we're set, honey.
All right. With that, then, so Pat, you did prepare that presentation. I don't know if people have the energy for that right now.
Well, I'm just kind of thinking through, sort of, because the reality is that's going through that presentation in detail is probably an hour's conversation, right? so I'm not sure we can do that justice at this point. And just being cognizant of people have families and lives and things like that. And I also think that, the other thing that we were thinking about having a little more detailed conversation on was, some of the kind of making this sort of a little bit of a study hall-esque kind of a conversation around, potential chapters and some of the objectives and strategies. I think, we're missing a couple of key players, right? From the committee's perspective on that standpoint.
All right, do we want to schedule the next study hall? At least try to schedule the next study hall.
Yeah, exactly.
What does Thursday look like? I know most of the study halls have taken place on Thursday up to this point, correct?
I'm available.
All right. Pat, Melissa, or no?
Thursday is not good for me. That's kind of why we landed on Mondays for study halls, but I could,
Oh, sorry.
yeah.
They're normally study halls. I apologize.
Yeah.
Can we do a week from today?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a potential. I know that Sheila works on Mondays, right? So let me have a conversation with her around, if there's something that we can do with that. Okay, because I want to make sure she has some ability to provide some input. So.
Do you want to send?
No, and also next Monday, just so y'all know, I've got a rec advisory board meeting next Monday. So. I was looking at the wrong week.
Well, we could figure it out because, like you said, Pat, not everyone's here tonight, and if the rest of the committee, we're going to have to field what works for the majority of people, right? It's not about
exactly.
So.
Yeah, and I think maybe we could do a doodle or something, but if we could do a couple of lunchtime meetings, I know that we did have at least one steering committee meeting in the middle of the day, and I know it wasn't like maybe it's just an hour, but if we could do a couple of them.
Yeah, and be very focused on the discussion topics, right? Because I think if we're focused on the agenda and say, okay, here we're going to just talk about just this, right? So we can probably get through it relatively quickly. And then once we've got the detailed comment from the detailed kind of content of chapter 10, that can be a conversation, as well. So.
Yeah, and Pat will have that final little pieces on 10 to you in a few days.
That'd be great. So.
Yeah.
All right.
But next week, but just so next week, just so, if we're keeping track of things, I'm fairly, today's the 7th, so actually this week I'm fairly open midday, right? Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Thursday or Friday would work. I see there's a question in the chat from Quantel about when the draft document will change. Just in terms of what's on the website now, if you go to Ossining Tomorrow, I guess as soon as is it possible as soon as the action agenda items are updated, that chapter 10 can be updated on the website as well?
Yeah.
I would say that once we fill in that table and also add in the changes that we're going to make based on the subcommittees, I think that's when we would want to put a next version online. Does that make sense to everyone?
And then just in terms of
and
those should be this week.
Yeah.
Okay, great. That's what I was looking for.
What was that? I missed the last piece.
You said both of those would be expected to happen this week.
And I see Montel is asking specifically about the subcommittee changes, and that's our plan, is to go back through the notes that Sylvia wrote, and make sure we've sort of targeted the changes that we thought were the outcomes of those meetings, and get those into the next draft and put that online.
Yep.
That's our plan for this week.
Yep.
So that'll be I know chapter 10, you said end of the week, just in terms of, so what the public can, I mean, one of the things about this process, it has been transparent in the sense that the draft chapters have always been online. But when we get those changes on, maybe there's a way we can, I guess whenever the draft changes up, maybe the subcommittee members could be notified when
When the new
changes
draft
to
is
their,
online.
yeah, or mail,
That would be good.
email each chapter as it, the changes are incorporated to the members of those subcommittees.
Yeah, just just a small process thing. I think at this point, because we've got all of the chapters combined into a single Word document, I don't think we're going to keep updating the individual chapters online. It'll just be one full document that's got everything in it. Chapter 1, chapter 10, and everything in between.
Got it.
So that's where all the new changes will be.
Okay.
Okay.
Plus, Jeff, I think, the reality is there's overlap. There's a close match, but not exactly a precise one-to-one match between subcommittees and chapters.
Right. So if they get the
Yeah.
whole document, then they.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Plus, I think a lot of the feedback that we got was, well, not a lot, but I know there were specific feedback points from some of the subcommittees, which really were about, making sure that, a certain theme is also referenced, or at least makes its way into another chapter, where to help tie the whole thing together.
So a follow-up question that's in there is about the subcommittee meetings. Are both rounds of those meetings reflected or will be reflected in the in whatever updates? I guess that's what the question is.
Yes, Melissa. Yes, that's what we're trying to do. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. All right. Anything else for tonight, folks?
Okay.
I think there's someone raised their hand. I'm not sure if you wanted,
Who raised their hand? I'm sorry. Let me check. Oh, Maria. Her hand is down now.
Oh.
Okay.
All right.
Great.
Great. Okay.
Well, thank you all.
All right. So good.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for the flexibility. Right. I think I think everyone wants to get the right.
No, we
product
agree.
To the trustees.
We
and
agree.
so.
Yeah, we agree. It's absolutely good.
I don't know if this is our last subcommittee meeting or not our last steering committee meeting with you at BFJ though. Would that be correct, or we don't know yet?
It was planned that way, but I think that we share what Pat, and we'll share what everybody said. And I think if you set another committee meeting, you have a choice. It's up to you. You might want to go through the document yourself and with Jaime perhaps, or if you would like us there to go through it with you, we'll be there. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to say, because I won't be on the steering committee after the end of December, thank you very much for your work. And I know we've identified some areas that through the process, the steering committee sees room to go further, but on some, many other areas of the proposed plan, that aren't as maybe controversial or whatever. I thought that it was a very, excellent process, and there was a lot of attention from your group to those areas. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Oh, great. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you very much.
And we still have to iron out all these other issues and how we're going to address the MF3
Why-
and the
why are you
S75.
going-
But
Jeff, why are you going off the committee?
say that again.
Why are you going off the committee?
I am going to take another role in the community. I was elected as town justice, so I start
Okay, right.
my term January 1st, and
Okay.
we'll have to leave the committee. So
Good luck to
otherwise,
you.
I would love to stay.
Okay.
Good luck on your new
Good luck
role.
as justice, right?
Thank you.
All right.
All right. Well,
I think that's it for tonight.
Okay.
Hey.
have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
All right. Looking forward to talking to everybody. I'm sure we'll be talking some more in the near future.
Okay, great.
All right.
Great.
Take care.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.